Hi, everyone. I am Paul Bloomberg, one of the co-authors of Leading Impact Teams. And today we're here with Lauren, a third grade teacher from PS9 and Staten Island, and Graziela, a fourth grade teacher from the same school. And out of all the schools that we have been doing impact teams with since it launched, I have to say that PS9 is probably one of the schools that have really embodied the work and all of the work. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit around culturally responsive sustaining ed and how it applies to curriculum. But before I get started, Lauren, do you just want to give the readers a little bit of background into the work that you've done with CRSC, or maybe like one thing that really stood out to you over that time that you worked with Ingrid?
So just teaching third grade and being introduced to the pursuits, I think working with Ingrid gave us a solid foundation on what the pursuits are. And I think starting with a preliminary foundation about what they truly mean and how to embed it into the curriculum in a non-conventional, easy way.
Right on. So what I'm hearing from you is the deeper dive into the pursuits, and the pursuits are actually, you can read about them in the chapter. But for you, it was the deep dive in trying to make meaning of them because they are kind of unconventional in the way that you infuse them within the curriculum.
Exactly.
Cool. And Graciela, what about your experience with CRC?
Yeah, I want just piggybacking off of Lauren, I do feel like working with Dr. Muhammad's pursuits and thinking about, I think we focused in a lot, Lauren, on like criticality and joy and really thinking how we can bring those together to further, engagement in the classroom. So we thought a lot about some action projects we can put into our units. And we really thought like, what are some authentic opportunities we can provide students that not only help them and foster that idea of criticality, but also help them have a joy of learning. Because if there's no joy and passion when they're in school, then, it kind of like, it ends there. And we need to keep them going because we're only in like third and fourth grade, and we need to keep pushing them. You need to go learn more in the next grade and infuse them with that curiosity.
I think for me, doing it in an approachable way that's attainable for them to understand without, pushing it down their throat, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think just for the reader, because you're very fluent with the pursuits because of all your work with them, but you mentioned criticality. So maybe if you could kind of just define what that means to you, or how you define that with your third and fourth graders.
For me, the way I just I've internalized criticality at this point, because I feel like we've been working with it for so long, is that criticality is when a student or any person, right? Because I identify myself as having grown in that area as well, can really understand the different, say, bias or the different opinions on a matter or on a topic, and formulate their own opinion after having heard and been informed of the others, and then come up with their own synthesis of how do they feel, what do they believe, and like where do they stand within society with their belief. Is that the majority of beliefs? Am I in the minority? How am I feeling, and like where do I stand? And having that really empowers, right? That's self-empowering. I know that I might need to be really tough on this matter because not many people agree with me, and I need to be confident on it, and really just helping students find their voice so that they can think critically and be a part of that, like that part of society where we really just delve into these topics that are tough. And for me, I really like to apply it to society. I tell kids that all the time, like, this is only the start. You are going to go off in the world and be in group projects and this, and you're not going to have the same opinion. So you need to let the world hear your voice.
Lauren, do you have anything to add, and how you kind of tackle that with third graders?
Yeah, so it might be a little different. So, I definitely lay more of a foundation. I think it goes back to being a critical thinker and thinking in terms of perspective and having more than one viewpoint. So the way that we kind of launch criticality, I phrase it in a form of power. And we talk a lot about that with relatable topics. So for instance, we're currently in our nonfiction unit We really talk about criticality in terms of who has more power. Would it be humans? Would it be animals? Would it be us? Would it be animal to animal? And I think when you approach it to children with a relatable topic, it starts to shift their viewpoint because they're engaged. They like the work, they like the topic. And, you start to see little activists, start to develop because they want to promote change. They want to have different perspectives. And, it does go back to that sliding glass doors, which I think they think an animal who's stronger or braver or bigger, has more power, but how, all animals, all people have a role, have importance, and have a perspective, so you start to see that shift and that engagement.
Yeah. So what I heard from you is just thinking of the content in a way that they can really relate it. And you use this idea or concept of power because criticality is just having a critical eye and looking at the world through the lens of typically the most oppressed. So I think it's beautiful that that's where you really lingered with the work, because in all the different topics that you're teaching, giving the kids the ability and learning how to look at those topics critically through the lens of the folks that are most oppressed, I think will create activists that will hopefully they'll end up be leading this crazy world, right? Because we need leaders like that. Why is culture response to sustaining ed so important within curriculum and instruction? And I think one we got out of the way, it's the joy, right? And then this idea of criticality. But is there anything else that you would like to kind of dig into for the reader?
Yeah, I think something that Lauren and I and the CRSE team and now all of the teachers in our school really think about is student representation in literature, right? So making sure that we provide windows and mirrors for our students and just how important that is for all students. And I was even in a map today and I was thinking about providing opportunities for own voice authors and how authors really take a moment to, share their own story with the reader in hopes that, they can help someone feel represented, someone, feel appreciated. And I think that's so important, right? It's important to not read the same types of book again and again with the same types of characters again and again. And, when somebody sees a character that looks like them, they're, that's like a twinkle in the eye moment, like oh my goodness, or the characters struggling with something they're struggling with. They're like, that's what it feels like for me. And that is so important to know you're not alone in the world, right? And other people can get through it, and seeing maybe a character, go through that story arc and how they like get to their resolution is inspiring. And even if it just inspires 1 to 2 friends that are going through it, right? Then you're also activating empathy for the other friends who are listening that, oh, a fellow classmate is going through that just like the character did. And it really just, it highlights so much. We just read My Name is a Story by Ashanti and the kids absolutely loved it. And it's, then we like listened to a song by Ashanti. It was just like a lot. And they were just like, this is amazing. And just like the name books are like, they're getting better and better.
They are.
So little things like that have such a big impact.
What I heard from you is this idea of representation and also having positive representations of all cultures within the book that we read, and especially seeing positive representations of your own culture. So that really spoke to you in this work. Lauren, do you want to kind of build on, or do you have a kind of a different idea? What are you thinking?
I think in terms of voice, that's where my initial reaction went. I think for me personally, opening up the door to allowing student choice and having students be more proactive in the choices that they make and the books that they want to read. And I know we spoke about this previously, but engaging them in layered text, such as a poem, a book, an article, a song, all these type of things, I think layer their interest and open up viewpoints, and I think a lot of in our room, we talk a lot about our feelings, how we feel in terms of joy when we write something that we feel passionate about, when we relate to something that we identify with, and that even goes all across subjects. And I think children understanding their strengths, their weaknesses, what they're good at, what they need to work on. I think just layers kids, no pun intended, you know, to become
Well, that was a pun though.
better citizens.
That was good. That was good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm hearing from you this idea of voice is the thing that really spoke to you, and giving the kids the ability to make choices and decisions that are right for them. That's the thing that spoke to you a lot with the work. I know this is a side question. How practical is all this?
I think it's very practical. And I think we spoke about this in terms of where to begin. And it's as simply as picking up a book and talking about, you know, Miss Casale and I have spoke about this, you know, mirrors and windows, and just them identifying it, jotting it, relating to it, and then building upon it. So I think that just starting as small as a read aloud and teaching kids mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors is a great platform. And then that can just lead to other pursuits. And then obviously more of the skill and the criticality are embedded, you know, inside of those ideas.
Like Lauren said, there's always a first step. And for us, I think that was the easiest first jump to make, right? Was just, and it felt so accessible to us because we were so open to it. The students were really open to it. And then from there, you know, we did take all of those little baby steps, right? Like making sure that Hispanic Heritage Month, we reached out to anyone who identifies as Hispanic. We brought them in, we brought their families in. We, you know, we took all of the baby steps that I think were necessary to really like launch this kind of work and really get engagement from the families and from our own staff. And then from there, you know, that's when we like started to tackle the big things, like going into our maps and, you know, making sure that we had not only like one read aloud, right, that had cultural representation, but we like changed it up. We were looking for, you know, social issues, you know, like revamping our teaching points so that we were hitting, you know, pursuits, you know, multiple times a bend. And so really like pulling apart which pursuits we were going to think about in those units. And I think all of that work is tough and it is time consuming. But if you take all of those baby steps at first, I think you really love the work and you want to do it. You know, you want.
So what I'm hearing from you, the work might start relatively surface with a Heritage Month, but those are sometimes the necessary steps to get into it, because we have to start somewhere and then we can go into shallow culture and deeper culture, but we have to start someplace. And what I'm hearing from you, it's just could be as simple as a read aloud and thinking about your questioning in a little different way and focusing on one pursuit so it's manageable. And I think that's really important for everyone to hear, because I think people become really rigid and afraid when they hear culture responsive sustaining ed. But I think that the folks that have embraced it, like you two, start to recognize it's your intention. It's not that you're necessarily doing a lot of things differently. You're just, the intention in which you do things is different.
I think I've also become more vulnerable too, in the sense of my modeling. Like I'll share my mirrors, you know, I'll share my windows, you know, so kids feel more prone to want to share their ideas, you know, and I think that it starts with us, you know.
So that's our next question. Like, how has this helped you personally? Because I know in any equity work that I've engaged in, whether I facilitate it or been, you know, a part of equity professional learning, I feel like I always walk out and it's what I learned about myself. And so what I heard that you said, Lauren, is this work has helped you to become more vulnerable. And it actually gave you a language to be more vulnerable with sharing, you know, your windows and mirrors. And I think for the reader that might not know what that means, if you could kind of come back to that for a second and kind of explain what windows and mirrors mean to you. And if you want to extend on what you said about what you learned about yourself, and then Graziela will go after Lauren.
So I think just in terms of what I've developed is just perspective and my viewpoint, because I feel like as a teacher, sometimes you could be very rigid, you know, and think that your end game needs to be very regimented. But I think having more of an open viewpoint and leading into more conversation around, you know, these mirrors and windows, mirrors being where I relate, how I relate, my experiences, you know, and windows leading into empathy. You know, I might not have experienced this, but I can empathize with it. I've seen it, you know, I understand it. And then I think the windows really lead to your sliding glass doors, because that empathy and that understanding can lead to a change in perspective, as simple as, realizing that maybe working two jobs shouldn't be looked down upon, but it should be something that you now understand, of an off-topic text, that we read about. So to me, I have to approach my own viewpoints in a different way. And I think through that modeling, it gives children the opportunity to kind of do that in more of a childlike, friendly way.
Yeah, but what I'm hearing from you is, outside of you having to model being vulnerable, which is always difficult, but it gave you a language to do that. And I also heard that your perspective changes and that you enter probably a learning experience for sure in your classroom, but probably in your life with more of an openness and curiosity, and knowing that if we're more open and curious, chances are, if we have that mindset, our perspective probably will change.
Exactly.
Because we're a little bit more balanced to the people around us. Graziela, what about for you? Is it similar, different?
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like where you guys left off is like really exactly where I kind of pick up, because I know for me, like just even culturally, like being Italian from a really loud family, I always like there's 7 siblings. Yeah, there are 7 kids in my family. Like if you didn't have your opinion and it wasn't the loudest, it didn't matter. Like that was it.
Yeah, my family too.
So yeah, so it was like my whole life, pretty much until I met Ingrid. I was just like always like quick with my opinion and with sharing it out. Like it was like instantaneous. And now I feel like in my own life, I have this sense of criticality that's just embedded, where I'm like listening, evaluating, then reflecting and thinking like, okay, well, what's my perspective? What's my take? How do I feel about this topic? And it could also be like, the clash of like meeting Ingrid, also like happening like 2020, like all of it happening at the same time. Yeah. And I learned so much about myself, where I'm like, oh, wait, like I need to be a little bit more flexible. I need to be a little bit, less rigid in my opinion making. And I need to really evaluate, not only like what am I hearing, but like what's important to me? What experiences do I have? What are the experiences others have? Yeah. And, just like kind of looking for those voices that have been quieted throughout the whole conversation, like, saying like, well, what do you think?
Like who aren't we hearing from?
Yeah. And I think
that's my concern all the time, is there's a lot of perspectives coming in, but sometimes perspectives we need the most, you don't have. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And that I feel has like fueled my curiosity as a teacher. So like, then like, thinking about adding in like marginalized voices as parts of my like units and things like that. And even just teaching what it means to be marginalized. Like I take a piece of loose leaf and I'm like, let's look at the margins. Like, let's look at the space available here, and let's look at the space available on all of these lines. And I just have the kids like literally study. I cut it out. Some tables just get that as their paper. Yeah. Some get the full paper, and we talk about like what is equal, what's this, how does this feel, how does it make you feel, and then we apply it to like thinking about people. And I think that just that idea has really just become part of who I am, and kind of how I see things now. And I'm much calmer, and like I take a quieter approach when I have to formulate my opinion. I'm like, okay, give me a moment. Yeah. So I might get lost in my family dinners, but other than that, I think in society, I'm making way.
Yeah, no, but what I'm kind of hearing from you is it's almost like a disposition of patience has come from the work. That when you're in a space, you're listening to different perspectives and you're more aware of those perspectives and paying attention, actively, really listening to understand. And then before you speak, I heard another, like, I'm patient. You're really thinking about it. And then when you do speak it, you're offering a perspective that's sensitive to the perspectives around you as well. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool that professional learning in a school would change our lives like this, right? And it does. I do believe it. I have found that experience too, that it does make me less anxious, not more anxious. What's been the impact in your classroom? Like, what do you notice from the kids? And when we say impact, it could be achievement, it could be social, it could be emotional, it could be engagement. Like,
Yeah, I think in terms like just going back to, students having ownership of what they do, being interested in what they're doing, I think sparks engagement, as Ms. Casale and I were speaking about it, and joy. I think that they're excited to learn, they're excited to share. When a little girl sees herself in a book, you just instantly see, like we read Soul We the other day, and a little girl was just like, oh my God, like I think that all the time, of myself. And I think the impact of the classroom again is just back to that vulnerability, openness, entryway to uncomfortable discussion sometimes, and just joy, just excitement for them to kind of relate to something.
what I love about everything that you said is qualitative to some degree. And it's the kind of data that in our systems we really haven't honored or valued. But when I hear you describe the impact, it's beautiful. And just imagine if those were the things we measured in schools, or those were the things we valued. But what I know about your school is those are the things that your school values.
Right.
And it's just really beautiful to hear that kind of an impact. Graziela, what about for you?
Yeah, I kind of feel the same thing, like that we have created this like joy and curiosity within learning. And we've like, I feel like because we're so engaged in this work that we think about ways that we can authentically talk about this. Like Lauren said, like sometimes having uncomfortable conversations, or like, presenting topics that maybe that weren't in our unit at first, and now we've changed them, that we're really giving this like ownership and empowerment to the students. Like, yeah, we're talking about this with you. Like, this is important. What do you think about these numbers? And really making them curious, and sparking their interest, and making them, want to be here and feel important. Like just, I'm thinking of like, we're in our natural disasters unit, and we really talk about the nitty gritty, like the numbers of like the money, the aid that went to New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina, and like we offset it with numbers that are happening now, and we like kind of put all the numbers out there for them, and like, what do you guys think about this? Like, what can you make of this? And they're like ready to write letters to the government and this and that, and they're like so excited about it. And they're like, do you have any more? Do you have any other storms? Like, can we look at something else? And,
like, sure.
And I'm like, yes, we do. Of course.
Yeah.
And they're like, and what's happening now? Can we get an update? Like, are these people in houses? Have the laws changed? Are the insurance companies covering? They want to know everything. And I'm like, wow, listening to them. And I'm like, I literally didn't know any of this stuff. First of all, when I first started teaching this unit 11 years ago, we didn't like even touch on that, right? It was like, there was a hurricane in New Orleans in 2005. That's it. And now we like study it for 3 days, and we really go into it. And like, we study the wildfires, we study like all of that, right? Like powerless versus powerful. And they feel so empowered. Like they really can make a change in the world, and they want to. So I think for me, that's the biggest impact has been, I need to step back. I need to think like, where can I infuse this into my units, and what opportunities can I provide? And then from there, like, that's where the magic happens. We put it in their hands, and that's where like the joy and the curiosity all happen. So it is important for us to take time, right? We need to have an impact on our planning and our practice. But then when you do take that time, it has such an impact on the students.
And like, what I want to let the readers know, when you listen to Lauren and Graziela, like, there is no way that the kids aren't learning, surface deep to transfer, because all of your units, from my perspective, and listening to you speak around how you're infusing cultural responsive sustaining ed, is getting you there. And I think for the readers too, that you might not know, is you can still get high test scores, and you can do this work, because this school just got named a blue ribbon school, and they have over 90% proficiency. And it isn't a lucky school. It's not a school where the kids are coming in reading at high levels. And I think that that's kind of I think a lot of people don't believe that you can do this work, and by doing this work, you add rigor to the curriculum. By doing this work, you have deeper learning. And I think if that's the message that we could send, because your test scores have not suffered as a result of this work, have they?
No. Mm-mm.
Probably the opposite.
I was gonna say, I think they've gone.
Yeah, it went opposite.
There's no way. When you listen to the questions the kids are grappling with and the actions of digging into text and researching and this idea of curiosity, there's no way that the test scores aren't going to soar. And I really love at your school, I feel like, I know that's very important, but I also know at your school that student ownership and agency is more important. Mm-hmm. So any last words for the reader? Because we're done. We did this in one day. This is awesome. Amazing. I know, because you're so incredible. Is there any last things that you'd like to say?
I think, at first it probably feels overwhelming, to see these things and to read them. But I think really embracing it and trying to make it approachable in your classroom with one little step or one little read aloud, or looking at a teaching point and saying, how can I just try to embed this pursuit? It could be a reflection question. It could be an exit ticket. It could be as simply and I think Ingrid helped us so much with this, because sometimes just Cielo and I sometimes always go extremely high, where it could be just as simple as, how do you feel about writing this project? How did it enjoy? So I think just a little change in anything is worth it. And I think then you'll see it almost like a snowball effect. You'll plug it into so many different areas, and I think you'll plug it into your transfer project, and I think you'll see it come alive, and then you'll just be able to take off from there.
That's really nice. That's good advice. Graziela.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, take the baby step, right? Just like we did as a community, right? Go in that shallow area where you feel comfortable before you dive deep. I think in order to feel like you can, integrate criticality into your maps and, skill and all of those things at once, I think you do have to try it out little by little and just really understand Dr. Muhammad's pursuits. I think that's the place for me. I constantly go back to that. I have we have sentence stems written out for each pursuit. And we really try to think okay, what are you thinking if you're in this pursuit? What are you doing if you're in this pursuit? And by having those conversations with colleagues, we really understood what it would feel like when we're in a practice. And I think by doing all of that, studying Dr. Muhammad and taking those baby steps of culture, those shallow steps with Heritage Month and things like that, I think you really can get this going, at any point in the year. I don't think it needs to be in September. I think it could be the day you decide you want to do it, you wake up and you bring that book to school and you start talking about windows and mirrors.
That's really good advice.
The day you begin.
That's it.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And we would be remiss in saying you better go out and buy Goldie Muhammad's Cultivating Genius and Unearthing Joy, because those two books are really all that you really need to start this work, or listen to you two. And I think for the reader out there, you can see why I spend 180, 200 days on the road, is because I get to connect with unbelievable humans like both of you. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.